You're not in Africa where you can behave like animals. That's what an immigration official in Germany reportedly told a black woman. This didn't happen on the street, it happened inside a German government office. And according to a major government commissioned study, this wasn't an isolated incident. Welcome to Newsworm. Today we are looking at one of the most significant studies published in Germany, the InRa study, an investigation into racism inside Germany's own government institutions. And what the researchers found raises serious questions about how public authorities treat the people who depend on them. The study was conducted by a team of researchers from 10 German universities and research institutes. Over the course of 3 years, they examined racism across major public institutions. These included welfare and job centers, immigration offices, police and law enforcement, courts, and the justice system, among others. Altogether, the researchers carried out multiple research projects. They combined surveys, thousands of interviews, and direct observation inside government offices. Here's the first thing that stands out. The researchers themselves were blocked. Authorities refused data access, tried to influence the research process, and in some cases, outright denied entry. If you are wondering why institutional racism is hard to prove, that's exactly why. But what they did manage to document is pretty damning. Most of the discrimination documented wasn't always obvious or openly hostile. Instead, it showed up in small, everyday decisions. Whose documents are questioned, whose case is processed quickly, who is believed, and who is treated with suspicion. These small decisions can shape outcomes that affect housing, jobs, visas, and even family life. So what did this discrimination look like in practice? Researchers documented a range of examples. Vietnamese women were frequently assumed to be interested only in working in nail salons. Some officials even suspected they were trying to become pregnant by German citizens to secure residency. Black individuals reported being addressed with language echoing colonial era stereotypes. Some Roma families faced obstacles to finding housing, and in some cases, their children were denied access to schooling based largely on assumptions about their background. Researchers also noticed differences in how refugees were treated. White Ukrainian refugees were often received more positively than refugees arriving from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, or African countries. Same offices, different treatment. For Muslim respondents, the study also gathered numerical evidence. More than half reported being treated rudely in a government office, and between 40 and 50% said they experienced discrimination, especially in job centers, social welfare offices, or immigration authorities. In one case, a job center employee questioned whether a woman wearing a headscarf even needed a driving license, suggesting her appearance made such support unnecessary. Researchers also ran an experiment to test how bias can influence decisions. Across 60 job centers, around 1,400 officials were shown a fake news article describing welfare fraud by Romanian immigrants. They were then asked to evaluate benefit applications. Even when Romanian applicants submitted complete and consistent paperwork, officials who had read the article rated those applicants as less credible and less deserving of the support. The bias wasn't personal. It was being fed by the outside world, and it was changing the outcomes people received from a government office. And here's where it goes from bad to worse. One person, too much power. In Germany's government offices, individual workers have a huge amount of personal discretion. They decide how to handle a case, and almost nobody is watching those decisions closely in real time. They decide how quickly files move forward, whether additional documents are requested, and how strictly rules are interpreted. That means outcomes can vary dramatically. One job center employee might actively help an applicant. Another might delay a similar case. In youth services, workers showed up unannounced at migrant families' homes, and decisions about whether to bring an interpreter or whether to seek consent before going through someone's belongings were left entirely to that one person's judgment. None of this is a one-off. When the same kind of treatment happens over and over across different offices, but against the same kind of people, That's not a few bad apples. That's the system producing the result, and the study says clearly that's what's happening. But what if someone experiences discrimination and tries to challenge it? According to the study, the options are limited. Germany's main anti-discrimination law largely applies to private companies. In many situations, government authorities themselves are not covered in the same way. Internal complaint system exists, but complaints are usually handled within the same administrative structure that oversees the officials involved. And many people hesitate to file complaints at all, especially when the same authority controls their visa status, housing support, or social benefits. Language barriers can make the situation even more difficult. Researchers documented cases where victims of crime were turned away from police stations because they could not speak fluent German. Whether an interpreter is provided at a government appointment often depends on whether the individual case official decides to arrange one. In practice, access to interpretation is often treated not as a right but as a favor. So, what needs to change? The researchers behind the study also offered recommendations. They suggest introducing a legal right to interpreters in government proceedings that affect people's lives. They call for mandatory anti-racism training that focuses on institutional processes, not just individual attitudes. They also recommend stronger oversight of official decisions and better data collection to track whether people from different backgrounds receive different outcomes. Right now, Germany collects very little systematic data on these disparities. Now, here's the part that puts all of this in context. This study was commissioned by Germany's Interior Ministry itself. It became the largest study ever on racism in German government institutions. So, how did they respond? They said nothing. Anti-Discrimination Commissioner Ferda Ataman didn't hold back. She said Interior Minister Dobrindt was sweeping the most comprehensive racism study in German history under the rug. Which leaves one question. If even a government-funded study on racism is met with silence, who is actually held accountable?